It's 9 o'clock, and it's possible that John has a work conflict since we're right in the middle of the day here. Just kidding. There he is. And we will begin today's special meeting of the Wabasha City Council, December 31st, with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, as you know, we have our end of the year warrants as our consent agenda. They're before you in the meeting packet. Do we have a motion to approve those end of year warrants?
I'll move.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I can second.
We have a motion from Councilman Walrick, second from Councilman Woodley, and we'll vote by roll.
Meyer,
Yes.
Walrick,
Yes.
Moyer,
Yes.
Sella,
Yes.
Woodley,
Yes.
Falcom,
Yes.
Duran.
Yes. We have a little bit of an echo, Tyler's might not be something that you can control. Sometimes when there's two people in the same room, I know it's hard to manage that. And I should say all members of council are present. Thanks everybody for being here. We have one second item on our agenda, and that is furthering the process of the city administrator hiring process that we're going to look forward to. Oops, I sent a little summary. To give you some summary, I think everybody's been given this some consideration since the 15th. Personnel doesn't assume any authority anymore. I believe we need to bring this back to council to have guidance to move forward. Wendy and Jeff and I did meet briefly just to compile our thoughts about options that might be on the table, and I meant for those to be in the agenda packet. Let me make sure we can talk about them. And you may have others that you've thought of as well. One second. Essentially, we can move forward with candidates that were ranked in our process. As Craig had asked during the recommendation for the last candidate, do we have other candidates ranked? We do. I would say that would be the step that requires the least amount of consideration, although I think it still warrants some conversation and discussion of process. I want to make sure I outline these. So again, I guess what I should say is we have candidates in line that were ranked, that were part of our interview process. We could assess the availability and the interest of those next 2 to 3 interviewed candidates, and we can consider making an offer contingent upon a successful background check. We can conduct a second interview of a selection of known candidates. We might consider including some that were not initially interviewed. I would say we have, candidates that we screened, that Tim and I screened, that may be worthy of an interview, and we'd have to talk about how we would make that selection. We could reopen the application period and then establish a process for screening and interviews and offer development. We can establish an interim period for some evaluation. We could engage some search assistance, and there may be more things that that Jeff and Wendy and I didn't come up with. But just to be clear, for any of those options or other options that might be out there, this can be done with a delegated ad hoc committee or council. Just to revisit what that looks like from an open meeting standpoint, if all of council chooses to conduct the interviews or screening, those would all be open meetings. So we'd be looking at, again, kind of back-to-back Zoom style meetings, unless for some reason we were to delay this to a period where we could meet in person. But does anybody else have any other options that they'd like to put on the table before we have some discussion about the process? Or any questions about those candidates that are still ranked, that were in the interview pool, or comments from those that were a part of the interview?
Yeah. Go ahead, Craig.
Okay. I was just going to say, can we do the background check earlier before in this process? We may have to do, if you have 2 candidates or 3 candidates, maybe do 2 or 3 background checks, but at least get that out of the way before a final decision and offer is made.
Yep. One of the candidates that is ranked established that they do not allow, they did not release information for background check unless they are made an offer. That's just one of the candidates that was interviewed.
Didn't our lawyers, didn't our lawyers say you can't do a background check until you've made an offer? I thought that was something they said before.
Yeah, I think that's right, Jeff. But to your point, can it be done earlier? Can we establish that the offer is solid and then conduct that background check and give some period of time between, that full background check being conducted and an offer being accepted by council? But I believe the answer is yes.
So that being said, you can really only make an offer to one person and not background check 3 people and then choose.
And I would assume, I'll state my assumptions and anybody can challenge it or provide their own assumption. My assumption is we would make the offer in the ranked order in which we, in the candidate's ranked order.
I don't know. I did a number of interviews when I was with the Minnesota DOT, and we were interviewing people inside the DOT and outside the DOT, and we did background checks on all the candidates before an offer was made. So either they changed the law or something's different, but I know that I remember making phone calls asking people the various questions. The obvious one, would you rehire this person? And a lot of people said I can't answer that question, or they would just simple yes or no. But nevertheless, you were able to run those things before the offer was made. So that's what we did way back in 2010 in the old days. So I don't know, did something change?
I interview people all the time, and all my offers are contingent on their conditional offers until the background check is complete. And they've got to essentially accept the offer and then sign the release form before that background check can be done.
Just a thought I wanted to bounce off everybody else is that I think the first thing we need to do is reach out to the next 3 candidates and ask them if they're still interested. Because if one of them's not, then we can just cross them off the list right away. And then in addition to that, I think there might be some merit in opening it back up for a period of time to see if any new candidates swoop in. That would be good.
Yeah, time has passed. Our process, I actually don't remember when it was posted. Wendy might remember the date of the posting, but I think we finished all of our screening in October. So we have had months elapse here where situations for individuals may have changed, both candidates that we were interested in and those that we didn't know about.
Yeah, I would agree with Brian on this. From the standpoint of the interviewing panel, are the next 3 candidates worthwhile? Because I thought they were. I just wanted to know your guys' opinion on that.
Certainly. Yeah, that was 3 out of the 7. So these would be numbers 2, 3, and 4 out of 7 interviewed. So we didn't just rank them all. We were selected. We stopped at that point. I actually would say there's merit in opening it up too. With regards to an interview process, I would have no qualms about a second interview of any of these individuals. I would have no qualms with it being done by an interview panel. I would also have no qualms at this stage of it being done by all of council. It's just the logistics of it are a little different, but I could envision that being perfectly doable.
I think your process, go ahead.
Go ahead, John.
Okay. I think your process was good. It was sound. I would ask or suggest that the personnel committee that made those last selections move forward, ask your next 3 if they'd be interested in a second interview, because you're going to repost it for 30 days or something like that. So that gives you the option of, are your next 3 your best, or is there someone else that comes in? And then kind of go through the same process as before. don't think there's anything wrong with it. And I think the result was what we wanted. We found that that person wasn't going to be suitable. So the process worked. It's just, we just got to pick up where we left off, I think.
Yeah, I'm with John on this. I think I don't know if we have to open it for 30 days, but if we want to open it for 2 weeks, ask the next 3 or 4 people on our list if they want a second interview, and then move that way. I'm with John. I think that would be a good approach.
Is it better to just deal with the next 2 people that were in line versus opening it up? Does that cause, like some confusion? Because when we interviewed everybody on the same day. We had the same questions. I'm just throwing that out there. Do we stick with the process and look at the next 2 that we have, which we usually do? We've done it in Public Works where something came up and somebody, bailed and we went to the next person. But
I could just make a comment that the next person in line was very much in qualifications with the first person that we had. Number 3 is in a different qualification set. And the only concern I have with that is I'd like to see it potentially open back up to even those who were not interviewed if we're going to consider number 3. Number 3 and number 4 are very well in their own set of qualifications, whereas 1 and 2 were in a very different set of qualifications, as in experience as an administrator rather than somebody who fell into the EDA aspect of things. So I think that if we're gonna tap into 3 and 4, we should probably look at others that we potentially didn't interview.
Yeah, Tony, I just going on gut feeling, the next 3, I'm not 100, they all have great qualifications. They all have their own qualities that I liked, but I don't have that, like, this is the one kind of feeling. So I'd hate to close it off to a potential winner by just keeping it to those 3.
seems like it's been so far a while ago. I don't even remember who 2 and 3 is, and I don't have any information on them. So yeah, I'd have to go back and revisit their applications or another interview. And
how does council feel about having, instead of having a new city administrator being able to hit the ground running and, jump on everything right away versus someone that may have to grow into the job some?
Jeff, my personal opinion is it's get the right person in there. My thought is I don't care if they have a massive amount of administrative skills. I think they can learn that. To me, it's all about, can you manage staff? Can you manage projects? Can you do a bunch of that? So I don't like to limit us to just that. To me, I think we're getting too narrow then. And I just don't know if we'll find that person that has a massive amount of administrative skills. That's me. I would just open it back up and then, potentially re-interview 3, or 4 people that we interviewed already and move on from there. Because to me, let's pick the best candidate, not necessarily, it's hard to not look for an administrator because we have so many big projects come along. But to me, if you can manage projects and manage people, I think that's a great qualification, my standpoint.
I agree that project management is key. So I agree with Tim. We're going to have, we've got the barge terminal, we've got the reroute of Trunk Highway 60 through the park, we've got the Eagle Center. Those are 3 big projects looming out there that they need, even though we may not be directly involved in one of them or maybe 2 of them, but we're going to be directly involved in at least one of them. We're going to need someone with project management.
Any other qualifications or qualities that maybe weren't, explicit before? The job posting, I think, is clear and it attracted the right type of candidates and a good number of candidates, but with regards to Tim and Craig's comments, anything further that you'd like the nature of those qualifications to be, just expectations, I guess, would be good to clarify. To underscore Wendy's point before, we had a clear distinction between candidates 1 and 2 who had years of experience as a city administrator and candidates 3 and beyond who had relevant experience that they could speak to, which was not in the role of a city administrator. So that was that breaking point. There were a number of very good, solid interviews, but in terms of describing the individual's qualifications right off their application, there's that line, that clear line. Just strictly, on paper, and to a degree, they were able to speak to, the relevance of that in terms of leadership experience. Tony said something though that I think is worthy of follow-up with our attorneys, and that is that if we open the candidate pool to include those that were not interviewed in a first interview, we may need to interview them with that same set of interview questions so that the process is uniform for all candidates. That's my understanding, and we can get guidance from Brandon at Flaherty and Hood on that.
Yeah, Emily, I would echo that. I think if everybody's willing, I would just go with the interview panel that did the previous interviews. That way we can have some consistency there. So if people are willing to do that, that's the way I would approach it.
And just another comment, is there much value in re-interviewing the next 2? Because I don't know what's the value added to that at this time.
I always find second interviews valuable. Sometimes it's given the candidate more to think about in terms of their understanding of the job. And so I find sometimes the second interview, they can be just a lot more explicit. We can create questions, assuming that we aren't going to second interview everybody, make a decision that a number of candidates, 2 to 3, 4 candidates will have a second interview, conduct a second interview, and have more specific, deeper questions rather than a general set of questions that gets, a good assessment of all the potential candidates. So I would find second interviews valuable at this point, especially because of what we're speaking about. We have that distinction of a candidate with significant administrative experience and then others who demonstrate a lot of potential to utilize the experience that they have in an administrator role. And I think it would be worthy of pressing on that a little bit and really getting to understand someone's experience better, because the experience of the candidates that have not been city administrators is varied.
Jeff, I think you brought up a good point. Maybe a second interview of 2 and 3 would make up your decision whether you need to open it back up or stick with one of them. Maybe you do that first, or I don't know.
Any thoughts on that? I would have a hard time. The break for me was with 1 and 2, with that level of experience. It's much harder for me to rank and rule out candidates beyond 3. They had different excellent qualities that I'd like to learn a little bit more about, and experience that I'd like to learn a little bit more about. That's my assessment. It was not hard to say, these are candidates that definitely answered to the degree that an administrator would be able to answer questions. And then it was I'm using my experience to inform you about how I would approach these questions. But there's very solid candidates in that group. And I think what we learned, if I can just, my candid understanding of those candidates, and I think this is a sentiment that's shared by others on the interview group, might mean that there are candidates that were not interviewed that we would take a second look at their application again. What someone can put forth on their application, and their title, et cetera, is distinguishing. But when you hear them talk about their experience and understand what does it mean to have been the director of an EDA and, this type of a community, that's more relevant.
This is Dean. I'm just gonna, when you guys did this last group, you obviously had a number 1, you had a number 2. If number 1 did not wasn't able to take the job, it would automatically gone to number 2, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think we would have, that would have been the natural break there, because again,
Just reach out to number 2, see if he or she is available, and if not, then start the process over. I've hired, I don't know how many administrators in the past, and we've always had a 1, 2, and 3. And if 1 didn't take it, we hired 2. 2 didn't take it, we hired 3. We obviously have a number 2, and it seems like you guys we're awful comfortable with he or she. I would suggest we talk to number 2, offer it, and then if they're not interested or not available, then start the process over.
Well, what'd be wrong with going on to number 3 then?
I guess nothing. 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, I think just remembering back, I'm possibly was the least sold on our second choice. And since we had a first choice, I didn't dwell on 2 so much. Whereas if faced with the reality of offering them, maybe my opinion would have been a little stronger for somebody else. So that's kind of why I thought instead of just defaulting to 2, we need a little more discussion at the very least, if that's the direction we want to go.
I think the availability interest part of this will kind of clear this up if we find out if they're still interested at all.
Yeah, I'm going to go with whatever the committee suggests, but I'm in favor of offering number 2 the job, but that's where I stand. But if the rest of the council decides to go in another direction, I'll fully support that, but I'm in favor of number 2, even though I haven't seen anything, applications or anything.
there's also no need to rush this. So I think we needed to have a discussion about this while it's on everyone's mind. And it's good to point out, what Dean did, which is, historically that would be that you just would go to that second candidate. I would echo Brian's sentiment that it was again, the candidate on paper is just obviously very solid, had a very solid interview, but I would be enthusiastic about other candidates too. We can have personnel reconvene to deliberate what council is, the considerations council has brought forward, and we can bring a process recommended to council as well. With that, we can inquire about the availability of the candidates 2 and 3 or 2, 3, and 4 to inform that discussion. That won't happen by our first January, our meeting January, whatever that is, 4th or something. But we can endeavor in that process. They're different. The candidates are different. That's
Yeah.
They're very.
Yeah, Emily, I think that's a good plan. Again, I don't think we need to rush into it, but I would like to get this done sooner than later. But I think what you just said is probably our best approach right now, and then we can kind of go from there. I mean, if we need to convene a special meeting after our 4th meeting, fine, let's do that. But, that's probably what I would shoot for mid-January to have this kind of finalized and the approach, and hopefully by end of February we have somebody, or even sooner if possible.
Right. Yep. Now, what I can say is that we know our budget now. We have an understanding of the complete, the levy decision, et cetera. That layered on top of the offer process, creates complexities. So that's one complexity that's just not there. We know what we can budget for this position, and that's an important piece of it in terms of an offer. So that is not to say that we would just simply make an offer of what was offered, but we'll take the person's experience and salary requirements into consideration with a known budget in hand. Anything further? We don't need to discuss it further. I just want to make sure everybody has a good opportunity while it's current in everyone's mind to express any misgivings they have, or I hear Dean saying enthusiastically he would feel fine with a process that just takes the ranked candidates, and that may be what we arrive at, but we don't have to do that today. All right. So personnel will reconvene. We'll schedule something for the very early part of the year to give this direction, and probably end up with a special meeting, if a brief one, just to outline a recommendation for process and have council debate and act on that. All right. That's all we have on our agenda. Happy New Year to everybody.
Does council need to give any specific authority to the personnel committee to proceed a little further with this?
That's maybe good. Jeff, do you want to, does anyone have a motion to continue to authorize personnel to develop the process?
I'll move
Make
that.
that motion. Go ahead, Dean. I'll second it.
We have a motion from Dean. We have a second from John, and we'll take a roll vote.
Solo,
Yes.
Walrick,
Yes.
Welcome,
Yes.
Friedmeier,
Yes.
Woodward,
Yes.
Moyer,
Yes.
Durant.
Yes. All right. Everybody have a safe New Year. Maybe it stopped snowing, but it's beautiful out there. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Happy New Year.
New Year.
Motion to adjourn.
Procedurally, not on my A game today. This is half full still.
I'll second that.
All right. I think we can. Do you want to roll vote, Wendy? Okay. Everybody have a good week.
Aye.
Aye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.